Hi, I'm Ken Fisher of Atigro. Welcome to our virtual coffee series, Leaders Adapt to the New Normal. Today we focus on managing a virtual workforce from the owner, HR, and sales management perspectives. We also have a recurrent segment of Ask the SBA, where our audience can ask questions directly of our favorite US SBA loan officer. Next week, in 2 weeks, we will be talking about more in depth about sales. Chris today will be talking about the management of a virtual sales force. And next week, we have a panel to discuss actually how to sell in this environment. Okay. Our strategic partners in my company, Atigro, have put together a series to address issues at the top of mind of small and medium business owners and executives. We intend to continue the series throughout the pandemic. We think a lot of changes in how we're doing business will be with us for some time to come. Our desire is to provide business owners and executives actionable information so they make informed decisions about how to adapt their organizations to the new normal. This week, we're going to hear from Barg Avender of Coglide, and Momo and Intridia, among other companies, Barg, that he started to discuss management of a virtual workforce from the owner's perspective. Stephanie Katz of CETA to talk about HR issues which come up with the virtual workforce, and Chris Tully to discuss managing and maybe even selling utilizing a virtual sales force. We'll wrap up with question and answer period from Rod Johnson, our favorite U.S. Small Business Administration Loan Officer. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors. These sponsors have made it possible to reach the community as well as provide support for these events. In addition to our partner sponsors, we have 2 community sponsors for this event to help us spread the word, the Special Needs Alliance and the Tysons Regional Chamber of Commerce. Oh, that's into Rod's slides. I'm doing different decks. And of course, Barg had to do a PDF. So let me find the PDF.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Ken. I think welcome to the remote work world. I think we could all relate some element of this cartoon on our day-to-day lives. Ken, can you go to the next slide, please? Mm-hmm. So I got an email this morning from morningbrew.com, right? So yes, I was working on my slide deck this morning. And basically the announcement was from Jack Dorsey, as CEO of Twitter. He basically said most of his employees are going to be working from home permanently, right? It was already on their roadmap to do that. And the whole COVID pandemic made it more urgent to address that issue. So it is going to become a new normal, right? And it's not just tech companies in the Bay Area, but it's also Morgan Stanley. It's also banking companies. Very traditional companies are also going to be doing more remote work, especially like our whole loan approval process was all done through all digitally, basically, all the signatures, all the, all the paperwork, and so on. And the other thing is that, and you guys will all probably relate to this, that your days have gone longer, right? So there's less boundaries and there's always more to do. So that's the new normal we're dealing with. Ken, next slide, please. All right, awesome. So my name is Barg. So I've been doing remote for 13 years. Before then I had sort of 9-to-5 job in the area in Bethesda. But my first company, we built software for, we built like software similar to Slack called Presently. We also built other software products for people like Phil Merrick at Web Methods and other startups, basically. So that's how we got into it was a remote first company, like that and so there's a lot of changes we had to do. Basically, if we had a laptop, we can work. In fact, the first few hires, I haven't really met them until a year later, basically, when I ran into them at Ruby on Rails conference in Portland. So it was, so we just basically hired people remotely, just started working together remotely. Ironically, we would actually hire in the DC area, and then they would move out to other places. One guy went to Maine, one guy went to California. So we would have going away parties, but people actually didn't leave the company. You know, they were in the same company, just working from a different place and stuff. So that was sort of the, you know, the world I got introduced to, the remote world. In the last recession in 2009, 2008, 2009, I started this mobile apps company that does mobile and cloud apps for NASA and the White House. We decided to take a little more hybrid approach to that. So we have headquarters, but we take a much more flexible approach to it. So I will talk about that as well. And then my most recent startup, which is doing sales and marketing AI, it's going to be 100% remote and global, basically. So next slide, please. So I'm gonna tell basically 3 quick stories, share how we do things. I'm gonna put it in a framework on this 5 dimensions of high performance teams, right? This is another one of the startups I'm involved with. So I'm gonna use 3 examples. You know, one is direction, where it's the vision, purpose, and the behaviors of a company. The second is connection. How do you build a safe, trusting environment between teams and within teams? And then the third thing is, and the, you know, perhaps most important, how do you stay productive and high performance team, you know, working remotely? So those are the 3 stories I'm going to talk about next. Next slide, please. All right, so the first thing is the performance, right? Like, you got to get the team focused. So the way we do that is we build a rhythm, a consistent rhythm. We start with the annual goals, you know, and then they translate into, and we check those goals and quarterly. I'm hearing background noise, Ken.
The people that are giving their opinions.
So can everyone please mute?
Okay. All right. I think that's better now.
Yeah.
So basically, we have this sort of a daily build culture where we're producing these micro deliverables every day. People can check the work. You know, we have tools to manage all that. So this establishing that daily build culture, as well as this weekly sprints where we deliver software every week, that created this culture of results-driven performance culture. And then, you know, we review these monthly and quarterly and annually. That's how, so the building that rhythm is very important. Okay, next slide. In terms of, so we're very productive, but then how do you build culture, especially as you grow the company? You know, we're about 150 people now, you know, and it gets harder and harder, right? Like, it's one thing when you're a startup and you're 10 people, you can all kind of work around the conference room, but then how do you kind of expand that? So in Mobile case, what we did, it started in my dining room, and we grew out of that. Then we would go and crash at conference rooms at other friends' companies. We grew out of, so we moved to Bethesda, then to Reston, then to DC, and then eventually we got our own space in Tysons as we grow each time. But one ritual that we maintained was that we had this Mobomo Day, which is on Wednesday. The whole team gets together. You know, we review projects. We have lunch together. But all the other 4 days, it's optional. People can choose to come in or not come in. But the Mobomo Day is the key day. We also supplement that with virtual town halls. Where we celebrate wins and team accomplishments, and keep everybody in the communication in the loop. And then we augment with that face-to-face meetings at clients or customers' places, or even at like conferences at Drupal conferences where we speak and we build a community there. So that's really where we get sort of our face-to-face time with the teams. Next slide, please. And I think the sort of the final point is not everyone is built for remote. Like I know my wife and kids hate working from home. They prefer to work in offices, preferably with other people. If not, maybe coffee shops, but they don't like working from home. So what we built is that when we built the office space in Tysons, we create a very open workflow, right? Almost like a hoteling. People can grab whatever desk, whatever conference room, and work from there. And then we also provided lunches, encouraged people to come in if they wanted to, have their own meetings. So we created this very flexible environment. And so that's how we were able to kind of build resilient teams and to scale the company. So next slide, please. I think that's all I have to share. Happy to answer questions after the other speakers. Stay safe. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bard. And yeah, Mobomo is a great example because it really was mostly virtual before this, and not even all the employees come in once a day and such. It's really incredible how well you guys have organized and create a very enthusiastic workforce, which even before COVID was mostly virtual. Okay, so let me find. Okay, now we're going to hear from Stephanie Katz. Let me get your slides up there. Okay, can everyone see Stephanie's first slide? Okay.
Thanks, Ken. Good morning. Last week, we talked about mobilizing your workforce and starting with ensuring that employees have the training and the tools and the technology that they needed. Today, we're going to focus on the HR considerations. So for years, employees have wanted a more flexible work arrangement, including remote work. And companies really didn't think that they could accommodate that, and all of a sudden they were forced to do it. And some companies have even announced that they'll continue. Bart took my wind when I heard the Twitter this morning. But can you go to the next slide, Ken? Mm-hmm. Mercer has been doing a live poll since we started, and I pulled these results over the weekend. And overall, employers have found that transitioning to the virtual work has really had a moderate or low impact. The two biggest challenges that they have found are their managers' ability to oversee the teams and their employees that are really experiencing mental health issues. The two biggest types of support that they have offered are communicating about their mental health programs and establishing virtual wellness and socializing moments. They also said that after the social distancing ends, that they expect the employees to work virtually in the short term, but return when it's safe. Ken, can you go to the next one? So employees have been working, there are some employees that were working remotely before all of this started, but when you think about what they're experiencing now, it's really different. There's isolation, there's childcare, there's schooling. And so what are some tips to help increase productivity? It's important for them to set priorities and define boundaries. A number of employees have had issues in dealing with their kids. So a couple of hints there. If the kids are old enough, actually just putting up a sign on a door, open and close, try to be judicious with it. But when you have that important meeting, that they know that that's not a time to disturb you. Another thing is kids love to come in and say, what can I have as a snack? Or raid the refrigerator, raid the pantry. And so putting together a snack basket's been helpful. Also, one employer was pretty creative. And what they did is they had a magician entertaining the kids while the employees were all in a big meeting. So I thought that was a pretty creative idea. Communicating is critical, and also practicing self-care. So I know a lot of people have been outside and taking walks, and that's good for helping reduce stress and relaxing a little bit. Also help to clear your mind. Ken, we can go to the next slide. So managers are not used to managing their remote employees. And so what kinds of things can senior leaders and managers do to be more successful in managing their remote workers? First, we want to focus on it being physical, not social distancing. And they should be setting their expectations. So you can actually talk to your employees and say, how can we best manage while we're remote? You know, maybe they have some ideas. They also can share with you if they have other things going on. Maybe they're changing their hours a bit. They, you know, have responsibilities with their kids. So really being clear about that. The preferred channels, you know, is it best to call them or do the chat? Communication, as I said, is critical. You want to be out there, because if you're not being transparent and talking to them about what's going on, then they may come up with inaccurate conclusions, and that's the last thing that you want to hear. Being compassionate and having empathy, but really realizing that we have this economic reality that we're in. We're also revamping some of the performance goals and focusing on what's getting done, not how or when it's getting done. So revamping on the performance. Being connected is critical. So if you think about being on site, you know, people could reach over the cube and talk, be at the coffee station, the water cooler. And so finding other ways to encourage that socialization. Some companies are setting up special pages. I know one company that actually every day has something up saying, you know, favorite movies or books or quotes, just engaging, because you really want to work on maintaining your culture and keeping the employees engaged. Having team lunches, virtual happy hours. And lastly, it's important to celebrate success. Okay, when you're there on site, you're hearing more about things. When everyone is working from their home and remote, you may not. So we're working with the company now, and it's important that employees are tied into the mission and goals, and we're putting together a special recognition program to tie in and have employees that are nominated and really tying into the mission and goals. Ken, you can go to the next slide. So in terms of benefits, think about trying to help your employees manage their health, finances, and the uncertainty that they're having. And you have medical plans and really emphasizing the benefits there. So we're seeing a rise in all the prescription drug, whether it's the antidepressants, the anti-insomnia, anti-anxiety. People are not just stocking up on groceries, they're getting alcohol. So we're worried about mental health and substance abuse. Last month, we did a session on the CARES Act, and I spent some time talking about the benefit implications. So there were changes to encourage telemedicine and also to allow employees to get higher loans and withdrawals from their retirement benefits, so that helps. And lastly, I want to focus on an employee assistance program. This is a benefit that a lot of companies have. It's generally has not been utilized or maybe even communicated that much. This is a critical time to focus on it. It's a program where employees can get help dealing with all kinds of issues. And if you think about what they're going through now, a lot of things would be helpful, whether it's depression, schooling, childcare, financial challenges. They can typically talk with counselors. There's 24/7 information. It's also available generally for the employee as well as their family. So maybe their family members, maybe people have gotten sick or have friends or family have died. This is a critical time. So really communicating it. And employee assistance programs also usually provide a benefit for managers. And as I mentioned, managers are not used to managing remote employees. They can get additional support there. There's also a lot of virtual training opportunities that they provide. I had prepared an article, which Ken has on the site, that this is a great time to remember your EAP. You can find more information on that. Ken, you can go to the last slide. So as you know, organizations are planning to return to work. When they do that, they are looking at transition plans. So remote work is here to stay. We mentioned the Twitter example, the announcement that was just made there. And so I hope that you have a little better understanding of some of the HR considerations, and you've picked up a few tips along the way. I'll be available later for questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Stephanie. And so just a program note, the questions will be entered via chat. So please go ahead and put your questions. And if you've already submitted a question when you registered, we have those. We also, last week's video is still not posted. We had actually a work at home problem. The person who was cutting the video, his computer died at home and we had to get him a new computer. So he's fixing that today. So he's working on the video today. So we had our own work from home problem. We didn't really talk about logistics. Next will be Chris, and let me see if let's see, and let's just make the adjustment. Does anyone see Chris's slides? Chris, can you see their slides? Chris Tolley, he's the best organizer of salespeople you can find. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Good morning. So I'm Chris Tolley. I work as an outsourced sales leader with CEOs and business owners to help them identify and kind of eliminate obstacles to predictable sales revenue. I've been leading sales teams for about 30 years, mostly in corporate environment. I've been independent as an outsourced chief sales officer for about the last 5 years. And most of all of that time, I've had the experiences of working to get results through people that you don't see every day. So, you know, in a way, I would have given anything to have access to tools that we have today. You know, 10 or 15 years ago would have made things a great deal easier. You know, to manage a national sales team, as an example, that are scattered across the U.S. or people that are international. That's a virtual environment. It's just not today's version. So let's move, if we could. I'm going to maybe give you about 10 ideas on how to work more effectively as a sales leader virtually. So can we go to the next slide, please? So the first one is thinking about retention first. And what I mean by this is the most important client relationships that you have are the ones that you've already made. You've already acquired each client. You're counting on that revenue in your quarterly and annual financials. And this month's revenue forecast is tied to current clients. You need to be in contact with each and every client to ensure that you are doing everything you can today to help them, and very specifically to help them help their clients. This may be something that you do for them, a service that you provide, or it may be something that you don't provide at all, but you know somebody who can help them. And this is exactly the time to think about retaining and building the strength of the relationship with your existing clients. And by the way, you should treat your prospects the same way. They need to be informed. You know, you need to be engaged with them. They need to know that you value the relationship, even if they're not customers just yet. So that's the first point. Think retention first. Ken? The next piece of this is a bit of a variant on the retention piece, but you have commission salespeople today in your business, and those people are concerned about their income stability. Most commission salespeople, it depends on the role, but you know, they could be making anywhere from 20% of their earnings to more like 50 or 60% of their earnings from commissions. They're seeing their deals today pushed to the right, meaning they move out in time, and some of those deals may go away entirely. They need to know from you as the sales leader or the owner of your business or the CEO, whatever your role is, they need to know from you that they're important to your business. So you gotta put your thinking cap on and figure out what can you do to help them financially. I was on a call the other day, and a sales leader of a national organization said, oh yeah, we've given them quota relief for Q2. That's the quarter we're in, because we know things are exceptionally unpredictable at the moment. We've told them that we'll consider quota relief in Q3, quarter that starts in July. And we're also providing them a commissions floor. So essentially what we're saying is we're going to guarantee that you're going to make a certain minimum amount. And that was then tied to activity standards and certain business objectives that they wanted to accomplish. So think about those things. You're going to need these people and have their heads in the right place as things begin to recover. So you got to encourage them every day, and you got to safeguard them. So do everything you can to help them feel like they're a part of the recovery strategy. Ken? So I think both Barg and Stephanie talk about over communicating. Look, when over the course of the week, right? So you need to find a way to have a one-on-one with every direct report you have. And that can be, a phone call or a video call. If you happen to actually be in the same place, standing 6 feet apart, you can still talk. But you need to have that with them so that you can stay in touch with them. I think, sales teams, typically the maximum number of people on a sales team reporting to an individual is going to be in the 8 to 10 range. So you can work out 8 to 10 one-on-ones. And if you're blessed with a smaller team, you can maybe spend a little bit more time. You should have a management team meeting. You should have sales forecast updates and pipeline reviews. Your CEO should be doing an update in a virtual town hall. If you have any sort of a collaborative tool like Microsoft Teams or Slack, those channels should be open and active, right? And when you do these conversations, when you have these one-on-ones and the management meetings, they need to be on the calendar, same time, same day, predictable agenda, so that people become used to this as being the way we're working at the moment. And don't forget about having fun. You can have a virtual happy hour. You can play games together online. There's all kinds of things you can do to try to socialize a little bit. Ken? So this next idea about getting your value proposition act together is really important. When you are working with clients, your value proposition represents what you deliver to them and why it matters to them in their eyes, right? So I'm encouraging you to take the opportunity now, when you have a little bit of extra time, to really work on this. And if there's any question about whether your value proposition is well understood, either within your firm or outside, this is exactly the time to work on getting that fixed, right? Your website is the front door to your business. It's always open. It should be obvious. And Ken, I know, has a seminar, a workshop I've been in a couple of times where he talks about what people expect from your website. And perhaps we can talk about that a little later, but it should be clear when someone lands on your website what it is that you do, how it is it helps them, and what it is you're asking them to do next, right? And then all the communications that you have with your clients on email or by video, you need to reinforce your value proposition, not in terms of the 28 things that you do, but how what you do benefits them. Ken, next slide. So we have a little bit of Ken, your slide's frozen.
I've updated on mine. You still don't see it?
Should say sharpen the saw. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it does on mine. Okay, you see it now?
It does now. Yeah, that's good. So
Okay.
I think by now we've figured out that our commute's a lot shorter than it used to be, right? So I don't know how much more time everybody got back, but if you drove, I don't know, I live in Sterling. If you drove from Sterling down to DC every day, or Arlington, or you use public transport to get there, however it is you got there and however it is you got home, you're not spending that time today. You have extra time. So I would recommend that you take advantage of the extra time with your sales team to help them build skill and presentation proficiency. So tighten up your sales presentation, make sure the slide decks are right, build better tools that show value to your clients, use video, build the opportunity for your teams to collaborate with you and help you build that, because they talk to customers all day and they understand what it is that people hear when you start to talk to them about your business. and then to practice communicating that value. So, you know, and as you talk to a client or as you talk to a prospect, you want to make sure that your communication process to them is as crisp, empathetic, and value-laden as you can make it. Okay, Ken, next.
You see it?
There you go. So,
froze it again? Okay.
yeah, fix your broken business processes. So when we were all working in an office, you know, we had the opportunity to see each other each day and to collaborate on things. Even then, we had things that you know, between departments or across the business or between us and our customers just didn't work as well as they should. Workflows that had kinks in them or handoffs that weren't effective. And I can just about guarantee you that if things weren't working smoothly when you could see each other every day, the chances are the situation has not gotten better with virtualization, right? So I'm encouraging us as leaders to ask our teams, ask your teams, what cross-functional issues do we still have? Then give them the time and space to get involved in fixing them. There's all kinds of collaboration tools that can help this process. And Barb talked earlier about having essentially virtual development teams working together for years. Give people the space, ask them to help you solve the problem, give them the tools to do that, and listen to the recommendations that they make. You'll find that your business is running a little bit better. You can't just not do process improvement simply because people aren't together anymore in person. Okay, Ken, next. From a sales pipeline standpoint, I guarantee you there's some junk in your sales pipeline. Not everything in your pipeline is a real prospect. Some weren't properly qualified in the first place. Some may move backward because the customer situation has changed, external events sort of taken over. Some have had close dates move out in time. So this is really the time with your sales team to get involved with each and every one of these situations and basically requalify them. Ensure that you're truthfully representing the condition of the deal. Because honestly, at the end of the day, and particularly as things start to recover and expectations for performance continue, you'd rather have a clear picture than fool yourself into thinking that things are better than they actually are. Great opportunity to do this with your team right now. Next, Ken. So if you haven't looked at your competitors, if you haven't looked at your competitors, this is exactly the time to get involved with your team and figure out who are your strongest competitors, why are they your strongest competitors, what are the points of differentiation between your business and theirs, and how do you combat that profile when you see them competing for your clients? Because they're challenged with the same kinds of things that your business is challenged with, and they're trying to figure out how do they recover as the business environment begins to become perhaps a little healthier over the next few months. And you should know at least 3 ways to face off against every competitor that you see, because you can pretty much be assured that your competition is taking advantage of this time to do the same thing. If there's any shortcoming in your competitive position, now's exactly the time to fix it. Ken, this is the last one. No, maybe 2 more. Address any people issues. Look, you want the best team that you can put on the field or on the virtual field at all times, right? And if there's any issues at all with any of your customer-facing team, now's the time to get involved in that and get the developmental plan built to fix those things. Have people practice their sales pitches. Listen to your customer service team as they interact with your clients. Figure out a plan for everybody who needs one to help them strengthen their skill set, get it in place, and build the strongest team that you can so that when recovery begins to be visible, you're in the best position to help your business recover as quickly as possible. And then last point, I think, Ken, this is the last slide, should be the last slide. So involve your team in setting sales goals for the upcoming quarters. A lot of times businesses don't, they'll use a top-down sales goal planning process. They'll basically say, look, this team needs to do X million dollars each quarter, and this is what the goal is for the year. A better process, especially now when there's some uncertainty about where business is going to come from and when it might happen, would be to combine a bottoms-up process where you ask your team what they believe they're capable of, and then have a set of top-down goals. The answer is usually that you're going to meet somewhere in the middle, but the important point in all of this is the more you get your team involved in building your sales plan for the upcoming quarters, the more committed to those goals they're actually going to be. Right. And Ken, I think that's it for me. I
Okay.
have.
Well, thank you, Chris.
I'm happy to answer any questions, and if I can help you in any way, contact information is on the screen. Thanks.
And I'm going to ask the questions from the chat. At the end of everything, we'll do open mic, and everyone will be able to ask any questions they missed or get any clarifications they need. So one question that was brought in the registration process was, I'd like to explore concept and ideas, target setting, goal-oriented structures, as one can't do minute-by-minute management of your staff. So how, if you used to be more hands-on with your staff, how do you make the transition between then and now? No longer hands-on. I've heard having to trust your employees a lot, having to empower them a lot. So let's start, Barg, and move on down. Quick answers.
One sec. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I was on mute. Okay, so I think the key is setting up the metrics and worrying about the results, right? So whether it's revenue targets or delivery targets, I think if you can establish those and then say, and it gets back into the trust, we're going to trust that you're going to get these things done, and you verify that through the check-in process, whether it's a daily check-in or a weekly check-in or a monthly check-in. I think that's the way to address that.
Okay, thanks, Barg. Stephanie, what's your comment on that?
Yeah, what I would see is that you're focused on what they're going to achieve and not exactly on how it's being done, but focus there. So Barg had said setting reasonable goals, and so you want them to achieve it. It's harder to be over them, and you don't want to focus on like micromanaging, but work with them on it, set things that are realistic given the environment that we're in.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. And Chris, I like Chris, a lot of stuff Chris said I thought really could apply to beyond the sales team.
Yeah.
So Chris, answer that however you want. You don't have to be too.
Sure. Well, for sales specifically, I mean, you need to have a repeatable sales process in your business. And what I mean by repeatable is that, whoever it is that's responsible for executing it, if they essentially, if they follow the path, they should be successful. And in order to kind of monitor results, activity and results, you just need to have that process well integrated with a good CRM system so that you can see what's happening. And I think both Stephanie and Bark have talked about, your focus needs to be on managing for the results. Right, and we don't really care too much about how many hours it takes you to do what you're doing, provided you're able to complete what you need to get done. And I think that holds true certainly for salespeople as well. So having key metrics in place, having the ability to monitor them, and then focusing on the result rather than when the work actually gets done.
Hey, Chris, another question, which I'll go to you first on, is what are good practices at this point under COVID to keep your sales force active in the business community? There's no longer the lunches, the breakfast, the one-on-one coffees, et cetera, et cetera. So what do you recommend?
That's a great question. I think there's three things. First of all, there are plenty of opportunities to interact virtually with your network organization. So there is this virtual coffee series, ABO events that Ron Wills leads. Those are now being done virtually. Tien Wong's Big Idea Connectpreneur has shifted to a virtual environment. So there's lots of those. You may need to seek them out. And you may find that the process of staying involved in that network is different because you're not standing around, milling around in a room at a hotel, right, or in a conference area. So you may need to be a bit more purposeful about how you engage with people by looking for people that you think are good affinity partners for you. But there is certainly that opportunity. The second one is that there are lots of opportunities to improve your sales and business development skills while we're in this virtual environment. I can think of Fred Diamond has been running, I think, 4 webinars a week, which is quite a pace actually, through the Institute for Excellence in Sales. I know John Asher's podcasts have continued. And there are lots of these opportunities. I would encourage setting aside time specifically for training and skill development, and then using one of those avenues to get there. And then probably the last one is we all have relationships with people. As salespeople, we all have relationships with others, partners, co-suppliers, that sort of thing. You just have to work a little harder to get those relationships to stay fresh. And I think that's just really a matter of putting time on your calendar to make sure that you're using it to reach out to other people.
Okay, thanks. And Stephanie, going backwards through the panel? Anything to add to that?
Also on that, I would just mention, Chris mentioned training. We are working with employers. If business is a little slower now is the time to really focus on training for the employees. And there's so many different programs and free training that are available to really hone in on skills. And as we look to the future of work, there may be different skills that are needed as well. So this is the time to really build that up.
Okay, and Barg, what are your thoughts about keeping active in the business community to enhance awareness?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do a lot of work with government, right? Which basically is a very relationship-based business. We do so far, like, things have been great with RFPs, and we haven't seen any slowdowns. But we can see effects of us not kind of meeting our customers 6 months from now, that we think we are going to be hit with some of that. And I think we're taking some steps to, we're having more conversations with our customers over Zoom. I know Ed in this call is doing a virtual cocktail hour. I guess you can make it like sort of informative, mixology session or something like that. But we're trying to figure out ways to stay connected, stay relevant. Some of the things that we've been also doing is featuring our customers as speakers at some of these things and sharing their experience with going digital and digital cloud transformation and digital transformation. So I guess it's forcing us to be innovative, because I don't think we're gonna, we're trying different things and see what works.
And some companies, Ken, I know you've done this, where you've taken on trying to give back more to the community. So that gives you more brand awareness as well, which, you're doing something good for the community. So there are organizations I know that are working with nonprofits or making donations and trying to help out the community.
Okay. Just had another app interfere with my screen share. 2 questions for Stephanie, as soon as I can see the chat again. Okay. There we go. I think I'm back to the right screen now. Withdrawal from retirement accounts, or provisions being made or offered for no penalty withdrawals? Do you know of?
Yes. So the CARES Act allows up to $100,000 to come out from the retirement plan, but it is something that the plan will need to adopt. So we're working with employers, making sure that they're aware of what they can do. So if a participant is affected by this and has the financial need, they certify it, and you want to make sure that your administrator can handle it. So you just coordinate it, and you can take it out without the early withdrawal penalty, and you even have the opportunity to pay it back. So it's different than the regular hardship withdrawal, and the limit is up to $100,000.
Okay, and I see Fred has confirmed he's doing 4 webinars a week, and I can tell you, doing one every 2 weeks, that is a crazy pace. Now, Stephanie, another question for you, and I think this would be good for. Let me broaden the question a little bit. It's about workday hours, and now that everyone's home, do you encourage a hard stop? And let me broaden that to, what about policies about how people should work from home? So, for instance, we have a policy that suggests they have a private space that's separate, that's noise-free, whenever possible. And you mentioned now with kids home, that's even harder. So we've had to be a lot more flexible about that as well. So how should you encourage your employees to set up their space, come to quote unquote work, et cetera, thinking of Barg's cartoon from the beginning? Is that okay if that's the situation, or is that not healthy?
Okay, we had worked with employers to do telecommuting policies prior to all of this, and you would have more strict guidelines, Ken, as you were mentioning, with the equipment and the space and all of that. Employers now, as a result of the virus, have had to be a lot more flexible. And when employees were working from home before the virus, usually the kids were off at school. With school being canceled in their home, it's more of a challenge. So we are encouraging that they do have space set up. A lot of families are dealing with their college, kids coming home, or even other kids, so that there's a lot more there. If the company, I think last week they mentioned in terms of equipment, we gave a lot of different ideas there. And if you can still have the company equipment, increase the bandwidth, trying to separate and have the hours. So I think, Fred, you were asking about hours. One day sort of bleeds into the other. I heard that, people are working longer hours, but being flexible. So if you have younger kids, trying to coordinate with your spouse, and you may be working different hours than you would normally be working, but to understand what is doable for you at this time and what helps with your work. Like, what are your customer hours and how you're trying to do that. So really just trying to establish it as best you can, but understanding that you're more flexible and trying to put together policies to work now and towards moving in the future. So I think it's going to be stricter policies when more people can be back at the office and you're not having the other, interferences now.
Okay. Barg, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think my schedule has become more regimented since COVID. Actually, it used to be a lot more fluid before, but now that the whole, I have an older kid, so we're all cooking together around 6 o'clock. That kind of sets up the, so we all kind of get out of our rooms and get together. So we do have more of a boundary set up, even just out of the respect for the rest of the family members and all that. But we're also getting more work done, more focused. Before I used to go to a lot of networking events, right? And that would kill the whole night. Right, like you leave at 4 or whatever, and you're on the road for 2 hours or more, and but all those distractions are gone. It's much more focused, and we're getting a lot done.
So, Barg, what are you telling your employees about what your practices are, or what you think they should do, or are you leaving it up to them to decide?
We pretty much leave it up to them. We have the sort of the normal business hours where they're available on Slack and Zoom, and everybody is pretty. I wish more people use Zoom. I mean, a video. Sorry, we have a lot of calls, but usually they're audio. I think that has been changing, but we're encouraging people to do more videos. And just have a sort of a clean, neat environment, the best that they can.
I see. Chris, you want to comment on this question?
Yeah, I'm a fan of a structured workday. It just seems to work better for me, and I think that there are certain things that you need to kind of block time aside for, and perhaps not be quite so worried about what happens in that block of time. And I'll give you an example. So if you have you know, I've set aside, and you could do this, I think, in any business, right? You could set aside Friday mornings and Monday mornings for network time, right? So you're taking that time on your calendar that says network time and using it to reach out to people that you need to communicate with. Sales teams, typically you'll have you may have a period of time during the week that's blocked out to do proposal work because you need to have that time to collaborate with other people. I don't, in my personal situation, our kids are grown, so I don't have the issue of, trying to manage that, but I'm quite sensitive to the challenges of that, having lived through it in a different period in time. But to me, it makes some sense to try to be a bit structured. It has a tendency to keep you on task, and also kind of forces you to say, okay, I'm done at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock or whenever you choose to be done.
But how, as a manager, what would, if you're, in your role as a sales manager, what would you be saying to your employees about that kind of thing? Or is it, does it seem to be crossing a line into personal?
No, I mean, I think that as a sales leader with my team, what I would be saying is, look, I believe that, you're going to have to adjust to your personal situation. I don't particularly care how you use each hour in the day. I'm more focused on, are we achieving the objectives that we agreed to achieve, right? And recognizing that there may be some things that I want to be a bit more structured about with them. So as an example, at 10 o'clock every Tuesday, we have a one-on-one for 45 minutes to address what happened last week and what we're working on this week. Or there's a management team meeting I need you to participate in. Please try and work your calendar out around that. It's every Thursday at 4 o'clock. Right. So I think rather than mandating, here's how you should spend your time, from a management and a leadership standpoint, you're much better off being focused on what are the results we're trying to achieve, and let's focus on getting that done.
Okay, great. Any last comments from any of the panel on anything, or there's no more audience questions so far?
Yes, so as Chris was saying, you may have your team and they may be in very different circumstances. So if they have kids and you are responsible for some of the schooling, each of the public school systems have different things where you may not have the direct interaction with the teachers, and you may be the one that needs to work with them. You may be using some of the quote business hours to do that. So as long as you're focused on the results, and people may be working different hours, and they're available for specific meetings. So everyone has a different situation, and employers and managers need to be cognizant and somewhat flexible.
It almost sounds like the selection of your employees is really important. Anyone else? Last comment? Okay, so, okay. Well, I think we're going to move on to the next part of our the next segment in our program. That is coping with COVID-19 and how the SBA is helping us, and questions we have. So please start putting in your questions through the chat for Rod Johnson. Rod, what would you like to talk about today?
All right, thank you, Ken. I am going to change up the presentation a little bit. I'm still going to use what you have up there, but I'll change up the presentation to really address the new order, as I call it, the new order for business during and after COVID-19. And in fact, you can leave it on that slide right there. I think there are two decisions that business owners need to make. And one is deciding to whether to reopen or not, and then how do you recover after COVID-19? Now, there's some things that right now businesses should be doing, okay? And that is, you make sure that you apply to all the federal loan programs that your company qualifies for. So that would be the EIDL program, the PPP, and the Main Street Lending Program that has come out about a week ago that the Federal Reserve has actually put out and is funded to the tune of $600 billion. Now, I want to pause a minute and give you some statistics about PPP2 and where we are with that in terms of funding, and then the EIDL program. So as of last night, there have been, for PPP2, there have been 2.5 million applications processed, and $190 billion have been approved. As you know, in the second round of PPP, there was $310 billion dedicated to the program. So we have, as of last night, $120 billion left. So if companies have not applied, go ahead and apply at your local bank. Now, for EIDL, for the last 2 weeks, the EIDL portal has been closed. And it's been closed because there's been such demand for the product. There have been over 4 million applications for the EIDL program, that quite frankly, that has just overloaded the information technology system that the SBA has to actually process these loans. Now, what I'd like to do is give you a breakdown by state, DC, Maryland, and Virginia, of the number of loans that have been approved in each jurisdiction and the dollar amount. So we'll start with Maryland. So there have been 1,298 loans approved in Maryland for the dollar amount of $199,630,880. That's for the state of Maryland. For the Commonwealth of Virginia, there have been 1,805 EIDL loans approved to the tune of $281,449,100. And then the District of Columbia, there have been 380 applications approved for $82,165,800. So that's the EIDL loan. Now, you know, also under EIDL, there was the forgiveness portion, right? That where the company could get up to $10,000, which is $1,000 per employee, up to $10,000 for FTEs and part-time employees, okay? So under that, there have been 3 million applications processed, and here's the dollar amount, $10 billion, okay? $10 billion has been approved under the advance, as we call it, an advance, but really it's an advance that turns in automatically to a grant. So that's what's been approved under the EIDL advance program. And so we are between the banks and the SBA, the money is actually getting out there on the streets of America to help sustain businesses. And I understand that there have been hiccups through either the SBA or the banks. But when you consider that we've put out about $3 trillion in about 7 weeks into the economy, I think overall, both the bank and the SBA have done a fantastic job of getting the money out there, okay? So let me talk about for a minute some of the 4 main things I think that owners need to think about if they're going to reopen again, okay? They need to do a personal assessment. And under that personal assessment, what do they need to think about? All right, were they content in running the business before the crisis? Because some business owners were, you know, getting tired of what I call the daily grind of actually being a business owner. So now that COVID-19 has happened, are you content still having to run a business and all the problems that you may be facing today as a business owner? 2, were you making the type of net profit that you wanted? Okay, so you need to assess, were you making the kind of money when you quit that 9-to-5 job and went into business and thought you would make all this money being your own boss? All right, so are you making the type of money that you thought you would make? Have you considered other opportunities? And most importantly, is the business owner really ready to potentially change the business model in order to meet the demands of the post-COVID marketplace? All right, so that's under your personal assessment. Then you need to do an initial business assessment. Have you fully considered whether to reopen, close, sell, or merge your business? I mean, all of those are opportunities that you really need to assess for your business. Are you prepared for the extra demands that recovering your business will place on you personally and financially? Because a lot of businesses don't have the, as I call it, the dry powder. Once they've received all the loans and grants from the state and local governments and the federal government, all right, once all those funds are exhausted, all right, where do you stand financially? Frankly, will there be a demand for your product or service after COVID is over with? And then have you investigated the potential liability for reopening your business? Now, this third one is my favorite, right? As a banker, have you done your cash flow assessment? Okay. Have you determined how much cash your business currently has available by creating a cash flow statement? There are a lot of businesses out there that haven't created a cash flow statement, even in the good times, but it's important that you do one now. Have you created a balance sheet and income statement for the beginning of the current fiscal and calendar year? There are a lot of companies out there that unfortunately wait until the end of the year before profit and loss statement is generated. And so during the year, they really don't know where they are from a financial standpoint. Here's something very important. Have you spoken to your landlord about securing more favorable rent or mortgage terms? That's a big one. Have you spoken to your lender to determine if existing loan terms can be actually renegotiated? And that's where actually the use of the loan deferments for your non-SBA and SBA loans come in. And then if you're getting a new loan, then you have the SBA debt relief program that you can take advantage of. And have you really taken a hard look at where you can reduce or eliminate your costs? And then the last thing in determining if you're going to reopen, do a financial futures assessment. Have you done your financial realistic, because everybody does projections, but realistic financial projections that incorporate your current situation? Will you be able to afford any of the current debt payments after the 6-month moratorium has passed on any of the loans that you have with the banks? All right. Will you be able to reopen using your existing financial resources from the business or your own resources? Now, and if you're seeking debt financing, have you determined the purpose for the money? Are you replacing inventory? Are you going to have a need to buy equipment? But you need to, take these things under consideration before you reopen. Now, how do you recover after COVID-19? So let's look at your marketing. How do you intend to advertise that your business has reopened? What is your communication plan? Have you analyzed your local, regional, and national competition? Have you identified the key stakeholders and customers to target? All right, your record keeping. Have you considered what accounting system you're going to use to continue to keep your financial records up to date? And this one's important. All right, so do you need to do an upgrade to QuickBooks or any similar platform? Do you have an off-site backup of all your financial records and important documents? And then your technology. Will you need to adapt or add any new technologies or processes to your company? Is your point of sale system adequate for moving forward? And then just new ideas. Have you documented lessons learned from your business recovery? Have you reviewed your insurance coverage? Now pause right there. How many companies have business interruption insurance? And if you don't, hopefully this pandemic has been a wake-up call that you need to have business interruption insurance. All right, but it's important to see whether or not your insurance coverage is adequate. And then do you need to change your business model moving forward, either in the short term or permanently? So those are some of the things that I think business owners need to consider, whether they're going to reopen, and if you do reopen, what's your process and how are you going to operate post COVID-19? All right. So now let's cover the CARES Act. So you have the SBA debt relief program, you have payment deferrals to augment your cash flow, the PPP program, the EIDL program, and then the SBA Express loan program. So next slide there, Ken.
Sure.
All right, so for the debt relief program, and I love this program, and I'm starting to get calls about this program finally, because most of what people hear is about primarily the PPP and the EIDL program. But for those businesses, and you know, a lot of times during disasters like this, there are some businesses that actually thrive during disasters. And so I'm starting to get calls now about banks who are doing 7A, 504, and microloans. Here's what I like. Up through September 27th of this year, you can apply to your bank for any one of those 3 loans, and on your behalf, the SBA will pay the banks to cover your loan payments. That is the principal, interest, and fees for the first 6 months of your new loan, okay? And so that new loan can be used for working capital. Because let's face it, we're not hearing too much conversation post-COVID-19 about the working capital that companies are going to need to move forward, okay? But this is, and hopefully Congress will address that. But for right now, you have the debt relief program. And so you can use the 7A 504, the 504 to buy equipment or that office condo or building that you need. And the SBA will make the first 6 months payments to your bank on your behalf. I think this is a very good program. It's unheard of,
Hey,
frankly.
yeah. So Rod,
Go
so
ahead.
if someone hasn't been able to get into the PPP, or even if they have, and they don't know what's happening with EIDL, you recommend this is very similar to EIDL. How is this different from EIDL? Could you walk me through, you know, kind of what's the difference in terms of application and approval?
All right, well, see, EIDL is being used for specific purposes. Your accounts payables, your utilities, your payroll. For this debt relief program, you can use the money for anything. It can be marketing, business development, bringing on that high price, you know, that high price business development person you got to pay $150,000 for, you know, to bring in new business for you and secure government contracts if you're a government contractor. So that's what this is for, which is different from EIDL. EIDL has a very specific purpose. With this program, you can use the funds any way you want.
Is the requirement for qualifications the same as a personal guarantee? Is it, what is it?
Okay, so you're going to provide, it's the normal underwriting guidelines that the banks and the SBA uses. So of course, they're going to be personal guarantees. You're going to have collateral. There should be some cash flow, or the projections should show that you would be able to pay back the loan. Now, in my mind, since we're in this pandemic and most businesses are suffering, we're going to have to rely on solid projections, right, to be able to make the loan. Projections have to be sensible in order to get this deal done.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Do you want, and so do you want to go through the other? Do you want to open for questions? What would you like to do, Rod?
You let me go through the PPP program, and can we hold it just a minute? Unfortunately, my wife locked herself out. Just a minute. I'm sorry.
Okay, sure. And I will do my dancing routine in the meantime.
Work from home flexibility in action right here.
Yeah, we told them you don't have to give the talk the whole way through. If you need to pause for something, sure, you know, what you have to do for work from home management. What would you say to an employee, Barg, if this happened in a conference and there's an employee that kind of just, hey, I have an interruption. How do you deal with that if it's on a client call or something like that?
It's upstairs immediately, right?
Are you concerned about it or not? Or Chris? I hear Barg sort of in the background.
So kind of keep it quiet there for me.
Oh, okay, you're back. you're
I
back.
think
We're
sometimes
discussing.
small acts of compassion go a long way. So we are being
Okay.
forgiving these days. I'm from an HR side.
Well, yeah, I
All
mean,
right.
just think about, like we talk about, you know, the need to be empathetic in the sales process and empathetic with your employees when they have situations. I mean, we're all dealing with some version of this. So I think people have certainly lately, you know, obviously you want to try and avoid these, but they happen. You got to just roll with it.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
don't know if
So-
people heard our mascot, or my dog barking earlier when I wasn't on mute, but go ahead, Rod.
Yes. All right. So I'll finish up with this because I think this is important, because I think most people already know the rules and regs for the PPP and the EIDL, but I wanted to highlight this because I think getting deferments for your non-SBA and your SBA loans is important to be able to approach your lender and ask for a 6-month moratorium on your payments for your non-SBA loans, which are your lines of credit and term loans that are typically non-SBA. And then for your SBA loans, your 504, 7A, and microloans. And again, the OCC and the FDIC have issued letters to the financial institutions across the country to go ahead and issue those deferrals, and it won't have any negative impact on the banks and or the personal credit of the business owner. So I think those two things are very important for the business owners to know. So with that, I mean, we can open it up for questions.
Okay, so we have one comment from Stu Sorkin, who's written a lot about PPP, but I have a question first about the loan deferment. How does that affect your credit personally and as a business if you ask for that and you get that? Is that a bad mark on your credit?
Well, under normal circumstances, it could be because you're 90 days, you know, you're essentially 90 days late, okay? So that could, but under the new operating model, it will not. So the banks won't report that you're, you know,
Really?
60, 90, 120 days late.
Really? Okay, I didn't know that. Yeah, and you also mentioned last time the express loan. If you're waiting on your EIDL, waiting on your PPP, you can get $25,000 very quickly. Is that still the case?
Yes, you can get $25,000 quickly. The thing is that the reality is toward the end there. I think it's slide 9.
Yep,
The
I found
reality is, okay, yes, the reality to that is the banks are really concentrating on getting the PPPs loans done because of the backlog that they really haven't focused on, because I've received calls where people have actually gone to local lenders to apply for the SBA Express Bridge loan, and which our office will have to address. What they're doing is telling borrowers, look, we're focused on the PPP. We're not really focused on the $25,000 SBA Express Bridge loan. So we'll have to make some phone calls to make sure that the banks are actually meeting, you know, the needs of the people that are applying for this program. But
Okay.
yes, it is a tool. It is a tool.
Mm-hmm. And Stu Sorkin commented, if an employee terminates their employment during the covered period, meaning the 8 weeks for PPP, I think he's talking about, and the company replaces the employee within the covered period, the employee's
You're fine.
salary is 50%, and if the employee's salary is 50% of what was paid to the terminated employee, will there be a reduction in the amount forgiven based upon salary reduction, or as long as headcount remains the same and no current employee had a reduction of 25%?
Right. So it's really, as long as the head count is the same and the reduction is not more than 25%, then you're staying within the guidelines of the program. And so that loan will be forgiven.
And if rent or other allowable expenses is paid on the first of the month, but the 8-week measuring will end the middle of the month, is the entire month of rent forgivable, or just the prorated portion of the expense allowed to be forgiven? Or let me throw in another one, what if you paid early?
Okay, well, as long as it's within the 8-week window, they should be fine. Now, let me state this.
Focus is the cash, is the money leaving the bank within that 8-week window. That's the focus.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Doesn't
Should be
matter
fine.
when it's being paid
So-
for.
So you
And we went
can
through this-
prepay. So let me clarify. So you're saying that, let's say that your 8-week period ends on the 10th of the month, and you pay January 1 the rent, the first of the month you pay the rent, which is for the entire month. You still can get claim credit for the entire rent, even though it actually goes beyond the 8-week period.
Yes. Now, let me state this too. There's a huge conversation going on right now in extending that 8-week period, because I guess there's been a lot of backlash about that 8-week period and actually extending it for a longer period of time. We're thinking we're going to hear more about that by the end of the week. I hope we do. And to me, it makes sense that you would extend it past 8 weeks, right? Because
That's really great news. Mhm.
Yeah.
And so that's really great news. I'll throw in one about PPP. You know, I feel I feel kind of left hanging by my bank about how to actually calculate it in a firm way, because, you know, you have these statements you have to sign. Hey, if you were misrepresenting, if you're giving us wrong information, you're subject to criminal, blah, 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 blah. And it's, you know, on the other hand, we have some general guidelines, but is there going to be a formula, a spreadsheet, a web page where this kind of thing gets calculated for you better? And when will that kind of mechanism start? When we're, you know, whenever, even if the period's extended, when will we be asked to make that calculation and apply for forgiveness?
Well, all right, so let's stick with so you should be asking for forgiveness around week 7, right?
Oh, really?
That's really when
okay. And how do you go about doing that?
So you have your documentation. So hopefully what you've done is you've opened up a separate account so that the bank can see. When you download that bank statement, then it'll see the lease rent payments that have been made. It'll see the payroll that's come out of that account. It'll see the utilities that have come out of that account. And so that's really your documentation that you're going to show, as well as the 941 statement. So that's going to be your documentation. And so the bank will review the bank statement and the 941, and then they'll say, okay, this looks reasonable, because obviously they can see where the payments have come out of their account. And that's your proof.
Bank. So it's the bank doing that, not the SBA.
So, all right, so there's a 2-step process. So there's the bank first that you're going to speak with, and you're going to provide that documentation. They have 60 days to tell you whether or not the loan is going to be forgiven. Then the bank sends it to the SBA. The SBA has 30 days to, we'll just say, review your file to make sure that the documentation is there and everything adds up. And then we tell the bank, yes, this particular file is fine for the loan to be forgiven. And so that's actually the process.
Okay, and if the period gets extended, does that 7-week start get extended as well?
It would make sense that the 7 weeks would get, 8 weeks, frankly, would get extended as well.
You said start applying on the.
But I said at 7 weeks, at the 7th week, then you would start the conversation, right?
Okay.
So you're not waiting until so you're not waiting until really that 8th week to start that conversation.
So
in the meantime, you've pulled your documentation together.
So we're kind of responsible for contacting our bank. Our bank's not going to come to us about the forgiveness. I guess it's more of an incentive for them not to, right?
I mean, well, I wouldn't look at it that way. It's just that it's too many. I mean, look, if you've had almost a million applications, can you imagine the Bank of America trying to contact everybody? So it's incumbent upon you,
money
the client, to do that, right?
I thought that's what banks did. They loan money to you, and they're like, oh, we're too busy to contact you. I know.
Rod, can I ask another question along the same lines on? You said 941s. So what happens if you have people who are over $100,000? What I've been telling my clients to do is to set up a separate account for PPP money. And
right.
that to the extent that the money that there, and any money for any payroll above that, above the $100,000 would come out of their normal operating account. So they could show that even though the 941 includes over 100,000, that they paid only use the PPP money for up to the 100,000, and they have something that shows additional money went into cover it. Does that make sense?
That makes absolutely perfect sense. That's what people should be doing.
Okay, I gotta tell you though, as you know, someone that uses a off-the-shelf payroll system,
Which you
that's
shouldn't
not
be
easy
doing.
to do. Oh,
Which you
we should
shouldn't be
not
doing. Right?
like
And
Intuit.
you've
We
heard
should
me
not be
say on
using
here,
Intuit. We should not be using Intuit payroll system, you're saying?
paychecks, right? Paychecks, ADP, Gusto, Ceridian, any of those, okay? Because remember, you want this thing forgiven. So banks
Right.
know those people, right? Banks know those people, and they understand. They know that documentation, right? So you want to make it easy for them. So if you're a do-it-yourselfer, you need to stop, okay? Being a
Well, no, it's not
do-it-yourselfer
do
and
it
going
yourself,
forward.
but I
Yeah.
said Intuit.
Well,
I said Intuit, which is not by any means a small company. It's QuickBooks, right? So QuickBooks has payroll systems that you can subscribe to. They don't allow you to change accounts for part of a payroll, a part of a salary, that kind of thing. So, I mean, I'm just going to have to like highlight and give them what came out of PPP and what came out of earnings, and hope for the best, because
Yeah.
small businesses can't do all that. We don't have a team of CPAs and accountants to just figure out how to change our payroll system overnight. So I hope that SBA is understanding of that, because I know for a bigger business, it's a lot easier to do those things. For small businesses, particularly splitting up a paycheck into different accounts, that's difficult. So sorry, Rod, we're promising candidness here, right?
No, well, but there's something called best practices too, that small businesses actually should be employing. That's my point. So going forward, I've given you the best practice.
Okay. Please confirm that if it is a cash out that is calculated in the forgiveness, not accrued expense.
That keeps coming up.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking at when you read the regs, they talk about accrual, but when you look at it, it is cash out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from a very practical standpoint. I shouldn't say
Okay.
that, but it is.
Okay. And let me ask you, something that came up last week was the issue of internet as utilities. And my understanding from an email from you is the SBA, as a result of this webinar series, is now allowing the internet to be counted as utilities.
Yes, it is. Much to my chagrin, but yes, it is. It is counted.
You hear that, everyone? We've changed the world.
Yeah, so yes, it is. The internet is. For those who use voice over IP.
So, okay, voice over IP, but also, how about if you have hosting, or is it just your connection, or is it your website?
Your connection.
Does your website count? No, just a connection.
All of that, to get on the internet, anything internet related, it counts for business purposes.
Because I have a large hosting bill with my clients. I wouldn't think that would count, but maybe it does. Does that
You're
count?
fine. You're fine.
I'm fine. But here's
a
a question. I pay that with my credit card. So does it matter when I pay it with a credit card, or does it pay when I pay it with pay the credit card with cash?
Okay, so as your documentation, right, you're going to use the credit card statement to show, right,
Mhm.
that bill. And
Okay.
then you're going to show the corresponding cash, right, out of that account.
Okay, so you
So
still,
you
it
gotta,
still
you
has to,
gotta,
the
so you
credit
gotta
card bill
match them
has to
up.
be paid.
So you
Okay,
gotta
the
match them
credit
up.
card bill, right, the credit card bill has to be paid. I know you'll tell me, Ken, best practice, you should have changed how you pay all your bills, but you know, we just don't have the time. You know, it's hard to do all that, you know? We appreciate the money, but you know, you want us to work for it? Come on. So, okay, any other questions? Let's do open mic. Does anyone want to jump in?
I have one other question I've been getting, which
I
is,
would have never guessed it. I would have never guessed. Go ahead.
yeah. The definition of rent. If your rent includes pass-throughs such as real estate taxes, etc., I'm based on the if it's under the agreement that it says it's rent, is that counted for purposes, or is it only the base rent?
You know what? And look, that distinction honestly hasn't been made. It really hasn't. That's a good question. And actually, I have to come back to Ken with the answer on that.
Because my
Another
reading, it
opportunity
says,
to
my
change the
reading of the
SBA policy, guys.
statute, my reading of the statute says rent under the under a lease. And if the term rent says, is when they use the term rent versus base rent versus additional rent, if they use the term rent as it, I would think that the pass-through should count, but that would be a good clarification.
Right, net versus a triple net lease.
Right, if you're paying on a
Yes,
triple net
that's what-
lease, that to me is rent.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I knew exactly where you were going. That's really a good question. So I have made a note of that.
Great, thank you.
Let me know and I'll write a note to everyone who's attended any of these, and we'll also clarify, we'll make sure everyone understands about the utilities and about the reach out to the bank. That's something I have not heard before, that we're responsible for reaching out to our bank. Because I've been,
Yes.
the bank said, I don't know, talk to the SBA. That's what I've heard from my bank.
So,
So,
yeah, no, you're actually reaching out to the bank.
and
also,
them,
let
hey,
me-
the SBA, can I bring you with me to that meeting?
Actually, Ken,
and let me
the
say
statute
this.
was clear. The statute was clear that it was the taxpayer's obligation to apply for forgiveness. That's how the statute is actually written. So it's not a pass off. That they made it very clear that it's up to the borrower to go to the bank to make the application for forgiveness.
Wow, okay.
And that's why I said you start the conversation in week 7. You don't want to wait till the last week to start that conversation.
Okay, I have to figure out what my week 7 is.
And start pulling your information together. Now, here's something that's come up, which I thought was very odd. So if there are banks that are asking you business owners for personal guarantees, which is a no-no, and collateral, which is a no-no, please call me so that I can call that individual bank and let them know, because there have been some banks that have actually required personal guarantees and collateral, which is against the interim ruling. So if you have people calling in or letting you know that, please let me know which bank it is so that I can make that phone call to that bank to tell them to cut it out, because they'll lose their 100% guarantee if they're doing that.
Okay. So contact me, everyone, and I'll put you in touch with Rod directly, and we'll make another change to the SBA. We'll make a change to the banking policy. We've already made a change to the SBA policy, right, Rod? And give me that one.
Yep.
And okay, and then here's another question from Laura. Why can't you wait until 8 weeks ends to present your forgiveness? I think what you're saying is start the conversation and present it. But is there a deadline to when you have to present the forgiveness currently, even though it may get extended?
Well, they're not telling you that, okay, at the end of the 8 weeks, you only have 8 weeks to make your case to the bank. So it's not very specific in the interim ruling about that. But I'm just saying that, as a matter of practicality, you do want to just start in week 7 to have the conversation, because look,
Right.
the banks are going to be overwhelmed with the requests, right? They just are.
It's going to be one of those situations again. Get to know your banker. Send them something from Becky Briggs if she's still online. And don't send Rod anything because he's a federal employee.
Can I make a comment though on no, it's okay, on knowing your banker, because that's the other thing. There are too many companies out there that do not have a relationship with either a business banker or a commercial banker at their respective banks. A lot of times they have a relationship with the branch people, but it's really not the branch people that are making the decisions. So make sure that you have an assigned business banker or commercial lender that you have a relationship with, because they can get a whole lot of things done for you within, the confines of that particular financial institution. It's very important.
I know I do, and after the 5th cell phone call in 1 hour, he gets back to me. Just kidding. One last question I have is, I do have an idle application, and I've been assigned a loan number, and they asked me for more documentation. I provided them 4 weeks ago. I called up your number that's on here, and they said, well, we don't see the documents that you've sent. I'm like, do I need to send again? No, don't worry about it. We'll find them in the email someday. And should I be worried? It seems like they're very far behind, but I don't even know if they've gotten it. I know the email was sent, but that's it.
All right. So I did work in the Office of Disaster Assistance for a year during the Maria and Harvey hurricanes. I can tell you it's an absolute zoo working in that office. All the emails, when you've uploaded the documents, they all eventually get to the hands of the loan processors. They really do. But when you're talking to someone on the 800 number, just imagine that you have 1,000 people that are processing applications, and you have what I call pre-processors that are trying to sort the information out and put it with the right file. Okay, and that just takes time, but they do catch up, and the information does. If you send additional information, it will catch up with your file. I'm just surprised that they didn't tell you that on the phone.
Okay.
But, so not to worry. They did the right thing, not to worry. The information will catch up. All right, it just takes a little bit.
Okay. And so the 3 things we need to let everyone know is the responsibility to contact the bank, the utilities do count, and if the banker, what was that you said one more time? What do we have to call you up on if the banker does what?
Charges a fee.
Charges a fee.
It has a personal guarantee.
No. Personal
guarantee.
Or collateral. That's right.
For PPP, right?
Yes, that is completely outside of the program. Okay.
Okay.
Rod, one other question that's come up is I have some clients who think they actually got more than they needed. If they get their forgiveness, they return the excess. I'm assuming they just pay their charge, the 1% interest from the day the loan was outstanding to the day they get the day they actually return the excess funds, and that interest would be paid at the beginning of at the end of the deferral period. Is that correct?
At the end of the deferral period. But actually, if they've gotten too much money, look, just have them return the money right away.
Understood, but I'm saying I have a couple that they're not sure and they're saying what's possible. So they're saying, well, what happens? And I say, you can return the excess at that time and just pay the interest on it if you don't want to have the loan outstanding.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay,
yes.
Cool. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm just checking the questions. This conversation's been hugely valuable, Fred Diamond says. So thank you, Fred. So thank you again, Rod, for letting us beat up on you. Thank you, our panel, for giving us interesting questions. And we appreciate, you know, the face that you're putting on to the SBA and the
Thank you.
candidness of your answers. It's really appreciate, Rod. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, everyone, we'll be sending out links to slides and video of this event and the last event. Thank you so much for joining. We'll be signing off now. And
Thank
join
you.
us in 2 weeks.
All right. Thank you. This has been fun.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rod.
Thanks.